Welcome back to That Career Coach podcast. I'm so excited about our conversation today. We are going to be talking about how you are leaving money on the table and you could be doubling your salary with the Millennial Money Witch, Jessie DaSilva. Her unique take on business, on job hunting, employee retention has earned her the nickname the Millennial Money Witch from Forbes, which is no small accomplishment. And that catapulted her into the spotlight. So, welcome, Jessie. We're so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's going to be so fun. So, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into doing this and why listeners should be excited that we're going to chat about this today?
Sure. So I'll try to give you the short version because I know we are only going to be here for a little bit of time together today. But basically, I like to say I'm a recovering attorney. So I'm a former journalist, former lawyer. And basically, over the course of, I don't know, 10, 15 years of my career, I realized that every job I had, I eventually got to this place where I fell out of love with it, even the job that I believed was my dream job at the time. And after trying various different positions within the legal field, I decided to ask myself, what if it's not me? What if it is just traditional employment? And so from there, I decided to actually go after my dream, my secret dream at the time, which was to be some kind of life coach. So the first thing I started with was teaching people how to network their way to jobs because that was something I had taught myself despite being an introvert. So, of course, when people are job hunting, it's never just about career, it's about a whole bunch of other things too, everything that affects them in their lives. So I started there. That was in 2019. And then, of course, 8 to 9 months later, the pandemic hit and I was like, okay, so no one's going to be hiring for jobs anytime soon. In fact, the opposite's true. A lot of people are going to be needing to earn money without traditional employment. So I had pivoted to small business consulting. That's where I started teaching people how to start and scale profitable businesses because I had just spent 8 to 9 months figuring out everything you should not do in starting a small online business. So started teaching that, and then eventually the job market bounced back. And now I do both. I help job hunters, I help small business owners, and I even help some companies with consulting on their talent recruiting and retention. I've also got a book out, so I'm a TikTok influencer where I talk about a lot of different career topics. That's how we connected. And that presence on TikTok and a viral video in particular from a couple years ago led to me getting a book deal. So now I have a book out called The Witch's Way to Wealth, The Every Witch's Guide to Making More Money Faster Than Ever. I have it right here next to me. I always forget to hold it up when I'm talking to people. So I'm
So cute.
excited because it's got all of my wisdom in it around manifesting money, making money, whether you want to do it the traditional way during with a career or like in a traditional employment or start your own business. And it's also got witchy stuff in it too. So it talks about crystals and herbs and spells, but it also talks about science like neuroscience, psychology, a little bit of like quantum physics. So I'm a big fan of teaching everybody all the things. So that's pretty much the summary. And now today I'm an author and a speaker and a coach. So that's the
That's
wrap up.
amazing. That's amazing. And it is so true. That is exactly how I found you was through TikTok is I saw a video of yours and you were talking about the millennial job hop and how nobody actually wants to do that, but we're doing it because it's a result of the environment that we're in where loyalty is not rewarded the same way that it used to be. And if you want to keep up with inflation and changes in the economy and your goals, you have to be jumping. And that was something that resonated so strongly with me. And so I'd love to touch on that quickly if you're open to it about, what are you seeing with job hopping, with millennials specifically, and how we're addressing the job market? Like that was it just spoke so deeply to me. I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Sure. So I think I'm not going to say most, I think many people know that the best way to increase your salary is often through changing jobs. I believe the studies that have been coming out over the past few years have shown that you can suffer as much as a 50% loss in potential earnings by staying in a job longer than like 5 years because the average raise is around like meritorious raise, and we're talking generously, right? Not like a cost of living adjustment, that generally falls in like the 10 to 20%, or rather like the 6% range, like under 10%. So it's going to be like 2 to 6%. Whereas if you change jobs, there's a likelihood of getting about a 10 to 20% increase on the salary. So that's what I've seen, is that a lot of younger workers, so I'll say like lateral workers, because millennials are early 40s to I think like 26, 26, no, it's later. It's like now like 27, 28. So millennials being the bulk of those lateral job hoppers, that is like the thing they know to do. That's like, if I want an increase, I got to go somewhere else. And Gen Z's got loyalty to no one, so they have no problem with it either. But those are those younger workers. Those are going to be the ones coming out of school. But the thing is that nobody likes it. Like, we do it. We
Mm-hmm.
know that we have to do it, but we're doing it through clenched teeth. We really hate job hopping. I think most
Yeah.
people do.
Yeah. There's nothing worse than interviewing. To me is a little bit like dating, right? It's like, will I hate you by the end of this 30 minutes, or will there be potential for a second date? And there's that anxiety that comes with that. And I think that for that reason, so many people really hate applying for new jobs, because they have to go through that dating and that tell me about yourself. What are your hobbies, right? That awkward part of the relationship finding that we don't enjoy, but in the job market, right? And I so agree with what you're saying about, millennials are facing, I always tell clients, usually you get 2 to 4%, right, in a merit annual,
Hmm.
unless your company's doing a great job. And because of the way that companies budget, hiring budgets are separate from invoice or from merit increase budgets, right? Merit increase sits in one section, and hiring new candidates sits somewhere else. And because of that, companies can afford to pay more to backfill you, even though they couldn't give you a raise while you worked for them. And it's almost nonsensical, because then these companies have to spend all this money recruiting, all this money trying to bring people in. And in the end, they could have just given you the money to stay, but most companies don't structure
Oh,
themselves that way.
absolutely. And it's not almost nonsensical. It is nonsensical. That's what I work with companies about, is like explaining to them how much money they're wasting by budgeting things that way. Whereas if you were
Mhm.
to put the emphasis on retention, you're going to save way more money that way because of the productivity loss that naturally comes with somebody leaving. It's not
Yeah.
only that so many people have to stop what they're doing to pull the weight of that person who left, and then look at resumes, interview, do the whole song and dance. It's also that that person who takes their spot's going to have a learning curve most of the time.
Hmm.
So, and that could last up to 6 months. So you're talking about massive losses that they don't realize they're experiencing.
Yeah. So if you're in that situation, right? Say you leave, you decide to job hop, you are, after all, the millennial money witch. How do we negotiate a higher offer? How do we get more money if we are going to make that jump?
So I like to say that negotiating the salary starts all the way at the job application because, and generally I advise like a networking strategy to get an offer, but let's say you get it through a job application. And oftentimes there's a little box that's mandatory that says, what's your ideal salary or your expected salary? And you have to put a number there. And I tell people, put a fake number in. That could be repeat numbers like 44444. It could be 12345 6. It doesn't matter what number you put in there as long as it's obviously fake, because what I say is that the person who gives the first number loses. And that's because companies are essentially asking you, can you guess what we have budgeted for this position? And there's no way you're ever going to guess because A, you don't have that budget in front of you, but B, we all have this tendency to undersell ourselves, because especially if you're in a position where you're desperate to leave the job that you're in, maybe it's a toxic work environment or you really don't love the work anymore, you're like, oh, well, I'm willing to like move for the same salary. Willing to move for $10,000 more. And for all you know, that job, if the salary's not public, that job could be starting at like several tens of thousands of dollars more than you expected. So put a fake number in. And then when they inevitably ask you about it, either in a screening or the first interview or whatever it is, and they say, oh, we noticed that you like put this number here. I'm assuming that was fake. What are your salary expectations? you use the line, I'm open to any reasonable offer. Because you are. Anything that's reasonable, then reasonable is going to be within the range that you need. So you give that line, and if they're still pushing back and saying, okay, that's cute, but like what is it? You just say like, oh, it matters more to me the work I'm doing, the coworkers I'm with, that kind of thing. Okay, that's cute, but like really, what is your expected salary? That's when you just ask them, well, what's the range for the position that you have budgeted? And you put it back on them. And they're either going to answer one of two ways. They're either going to give you the range, and if it's an acceptable range, you just say, I'm open to that. You don't tell them, oh, that's perfect, I'd want toward the higher end or whatever. It doesn't matter. You just say, I'm open. And then if they respond like an a-hole, as somebody did to one of my friends and said, well, that's doing it backwards. That tells you to run in the other direction because they're not willing to, they're trying to catch you and they're trying to get you for as cheaply as possible. So let's assume they give you the range. You're like, that works for me. You go through the whole process. You are going to continue saying that line, I'll accept any reasonable offer the entire time until there is an offer. Because once there's an offer on the table, the power dynamic has completely shifted. And now you are the one with all the power. Because they've just decided that all these people who applied for this job, that all the people they interviewed, are not a good fit. Which means that if you were to say no and walk away, they have to start the whole process over again. They're probably not going to go to that second candidate. They're going to have to start everything all over again. So when you get the offer, there are two ways to handle this. Let's say you get the offer and you're like, oh my God, I love this. This is exactly what I wanted. Okay. You're still going to answer like this. You're going to answer the phone and be like, oh my God, here's the offer. Here's the job. You say, oh, I'm so excited. This is like, I'm so pumped. I'm excited to work with you guys. But you said the salary was 90,000 and you let yourself sound a little disappointed. 90,000? And they're like, oh, yeah, is that okay? And you say, well, and this is if you love the number they've given you, you're just going to ask for 10K more. Well, I was really hoping for something closer to 100K. And then they are either going to say like, okay, yes, we can do that, or no, it's a firm at 90 and you like that already anyway. So you just say yes and you can accept it, right? Like this is only to make sure that you're not underselling yourself. This is like, if you love the offer, just go ahead and ask for a 10K anyway, just to see what happens. Because best case scenario, like one of my clients, they just respond, they go, oh, no problem. We'll do it at 100K. Come work for us. And now you just got extra money that was on the table. But if they say no, okay, well, it doesn't matter. You're excited about the salary and the job anyway, so you can accept it and move forward. Now, if they come back with an offer and you're like, ew, I don't like that. Or it's like toward the end, the lower end of the range that they told you this whole time, and you're like, no, I want it toward the higher end of the range. You say, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'd really love to sit with this and think it over. Are you free for another conversation, potentially over Zoom tomorrow at such and such time, or, later in the week? Because you want to get them on a video call. Because what you're going to do is you're then going to turn around and do some research. You're going to go onto payscale.com. You're going to put in all your info. It's going to take your years of experience, your degrees, any certifications you have, skills, whatever. And it's going to tell you what your market value is for the size of the company, the location of the country that you're in, all of that. And you're also going to do research on that company and see if they have their salaries on Glassdoor and what Glassdoor is saying about them, because it has all those trends on there. It'll say like, this is below market or this is higher than usual. So you're going to take all of that information, all of this research that you find, and you're just going to make a really short, like maybe 4-slide presentation that goes through the title and the job and the offer. And then it's going to go through your like what the offer is, how it compares to the industry standard, and then what you have been adjudicated by payscale.com that you deserve based on your unique qualifications. And then at the end, you make the ask based on the data that you've seen. you don't want to lie. So if there's anything on there that says this is outdated or this is not, reliable because we don't have enough responses, you want to be honest and highlight those things and say, like, because of that, here's other research that I found to compensate. Like maybe you look at competitors and like what their pay rate is, or you want to look at maybe companies in a similar industry, similar size, in the same kind of metropolitan area. Whatever you do, you basically want to bring that to them. So you get on the call the next day and you say, I'm so excited. And, as you know, I'm going to like bring my A game. I've already explained to you how I'm really dedicated and I'm a great applicant. Would you be willing if I shared some information about the salary offer? They'll be like, sure. And then you walk them through the presentation. You just make the ask at the end. So because of this, I'd like X amount instead. And you just wait for them to respond. And again, they're either going to say, like, we can do that, or we can come up X amount. And you want to ask for like the highest you possibly can, like on the range, because naturally they're going to come in lower. So we don't want to like ask for exactly what we want. Whatever it is you exactly want, at least tack on like an extra 10K just to be sure. Because then if they come back and say, okay, well, can we meet you in the middle at this level? And you can say yes, or you can say no. And that's going to tell you everything that you want. And then like how they respond to this is going to tell you what kind of work environment that is and what it would be like to ask for a raise later on. Because you could decide to take something at like lower than you were expecting, but that opens up the opportunity for a conversation where you say, well, is it possible that in my contract we can say that we'll reevaluate my salary in a year and bump me up to this number? You can negotiate those things up front. Or you can negotiate a better job title, vacation days, things like that. Like there are other things that you can do to bring up and negotiate. But the key is that it puts it all out there on the table and you have that conversation and you have research to back yourself up. Because if you've got the research on your side, then that is going to tell them, okay, maybe I do really need to like give this person more money if I want to stay competitive. Because you can't just like a lot of times we can't just ask, and it's shitty that it is that way, but a lot of times you want to make it a really easy yes for them and giving them data that they could turn around to their higher up and say, hey, look at this data that shows us that our rates or our salaries are lower than the industry standard. That's going to be the justification they need to get the approval for a higher salary. So hopefully that's comprehensive enough.
Yes. No, I love it because it's such a tactical answer, right? I think
Yes.
a lot of people get really stuck in negotiations because they're afraid to be told no. And I always
Mhm.
say, let anybody tell you no. This goes for when you're in a job, when you're looking for new jobs, like let
Right.
them tell you no. If you don't ask, they're certainly not going to go above and beyond. So
Right.
give them that chance. Um, and it's definitely not going to hurt your relationship with them, right? I've
Hmm.
sat in negotiations where I'm hiring people and they say, hey, I'm really looking to get this. And all I do is say, great, let me take that back and see what I can do about it,
Hmm.
right? It's not going to hurt your relationship with that potential employer. And more often than not, they're going to come back and meet your demands, right?
Right.
To
Because you have
exact,
all the power. They don't want to start this process over again.
exactly as you said, Jessie, they just don't want to interview more people. They finally found somebody who works. They're done.
Right.
And so it is in your best interest. I always tell clients, no matter what, you should always negotiate a first offer.
Always, always, always. Yes. Even if you love it, even
Hmm.
if it's double what you expected your salary to be. Like I have told that the client whose example I used, she'd been making $55,000 for 7 years or so. She had never gotten a raise. And so she got an offer back that was 110. And she was like, oh my God, this is the most money I've ever made. This is literally double what I was expecting. But she had me in her brain and she was like, Jessie said, even if you love the offer, ask for another 10K. And so she said, well, I was really hoping to get something closer to like 120. And they were like, done, no problem. Here you go. And that's money she wouldn't have had if she hadn't asked.
Yep. And in my experience, usually recruiters will have like a percentage that they can go up, right?
Hmm.
That they know people are going to ask for more, right? The same way that
Hmm.
we know companies are going to offer less. And so there's so many studies that show that the reason there can be huge disparities within a job comes down to negotiation,
Right.
right? And I think back on my own career and clients, I've only ever one time heard of a manager going, "Hey, I took a look at this and you're way too low in the range for the work you're doing. I'm going to adjust you up." That never happens. And so
Right.
it's so much better for you to get what you can at the start. And then I'd love to hear your perspective. Once you're in the role, say you take this job, it's 120, you're thrilled. 5 years go by, you're still at 120. Now you're ready for more. How would somebody go about negotiating an offer internally? How would they go about
Sure.
asking for more money at that point?
So it's going to be similar, but I want to just say one thing, which is that what I always tell clients is it's always easier to negotiate a salary than it is a raise. And
Yeah,
that's just because of the power
absolutely.
imbalance. Because once you are in that role, now they have the power again because they know that nobody likes job hunting and that it's a big ordeal for you to leave and start over somewhere else. So they take advantage of that, knowing, okay, well, it's like a game of chicken. You're not going to do anything if I don't give you a raise. You'll probably stay. I'll play my, we'll see how that shakes out. So that's why you want to always, even if you love the offer, always negotiate. But let's say you are in that role, it's time to ask for a raise. So it's actually going to start like 6 months ahead of when you plan to ask for this raise.
Thank you. Snaps for Jessie.
I don't know when this podcast is airing, but right now it's post like the week after Thanksgiving. And so we're heading into the end of the year. January is a perfect time to do this, okay? Even if you've got annual reviews in March or something, this is a great time anyway if you don't have like a built-in review deadline. January is a great time because we got 6 months. Like you can do it now, expecting or like hoping for a raise 6 months from now. So what you do is you're basically gonna have a little chat with your manager. You can be like, "Can I chat with you for a second?" "Yeah, sure. Come on in. What is it? Sit down." And you're going to say, "I'm so committed to this company. I love working here. I've been here for X number of years. I don't want to leave, but I do feel like I've been doing great work. And I want to make sure that in 6 months or by review time, I could be eligible to discuss a excuse me, to discuss a meritorious increase." And so you're going to say, "What do I need to do in the next 6 months for you to feel comfortable going to bat for me?" And it gets to be a conversation. So your manager is going to be like, "Ooh, okay. What do we need to do in those 6 months? Let's talk about that." So that becomes a conversation. And this is your chance where if their expectations are unreasonable or that timeline doesn't work, like you have that conversation. Don't just accept it and be like, "All right, time for me to go pull 12-hour days." No. You got to have a conversation. "Well, here's what my role is, here how it's evolved, here's what I'm doing every day. Like let's make let's figure out like milestones that are going to work really well, like that are going to set me up for this." So, and generally your manager will be like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, let's like figure out what those achievements are for that 6 month point." But if they're unwilling, that gives you a lot of information, right? There's no losing situation having conversations like this, because even if you walk away disappointed, that is information that tells you time for me to start a job hunt. And now you get to go knowing that you did everything you could. So you have that conversation, you figure out what those milestones are, and you're going to leave and you're going to send an email summarizing those points. "Hey, boss, thanks for meeting with me today. I just wanted to write down a list of everything we talked about to make sure that we're both on the same page." Because, good boss, even the best bosses, we all create like memories, issues with memories, right? Like that can happen to anybody, the best of us. So you're just going to document it and say, like, "Are there any changes that you need to make? Or did I understand everything correctly? Whatever." And you get them to respond. If they don't respond, you want to like basically get that get that written response. Like, this is from my lawyer days, cover your ass. Like, we want everything in writing. So you
CYA.
get them to agree to it. Yes. You're going to start your hustle, start doing your work, start doing what you can to achieve those milestones. 3 months in, you're going to have a check-in with your boss. "Hey, can I get on your calendar? Can we sit down and talk? I want to talk about my progress on these goals that we set in January. Sit down, talk about my performance so far. Where could I be improving? Where am I slacking? Like, let's have a robust conversation about it. Okay, great. Everybody's like, all right, I'm clear. Okay, so 3 months from now, we can have this conversation about my salary then based on my performance. Great. We're both on the same page again. 1 month before you plan to have that conversation, you're going to pop into your boss's office and say, hi, I just want to give you a heads up. Been working on these things. I'd like to get on your calendar in a month to discuss my compensation about like regarding my performance of the past 6 months. All right. Like I'm just popping in to like remind you of that and be like, if you want to talk about my performance or anything, give me any feedback. I'd love like, let's sit down and talk about it. But like, can I get that time on your calendar for a month from now? So that way, this is like an ongoing thing. Your boss can't forget. They're not going to go walk off into the ether and forget that you were supposed to have this conversation because you are reminding them all the time. So then, what you're going to do a month out before you get there, you're going to make another presentation, just like you would have to negotiate your salary. You're going to talk about the points that you discussed. You're going to talk about your progress with them. And then you're also going to share information from either payscale.com, where it gives you that personal breakdown of what you should be paid according to your qualifications and all of that. You could have some of that. You can have some industry stuff. Basically, you want to walk in there with a presentation that makes it your boss's idea to give you a meritorious increase, because you want them to walk away and be like, can you send me this presentation that I can take to my boss and show them why you deserve this raise of 10 or 20%, whatever it is you're asking for. That's the thing you want to do. And keep in mind, you can negotiate more than just pay. You can always negotiate a title. Say you're like, well, my title's kind of like, it is what it is, like graphic design, right? Like graphic designer. Put senior in front of it, manager in front of it, whatever it is, because a lot of times those titles can shift the kind of jobs you get later on or the kind of pay you can get. So keep in mind, you can negotiate the title and you can negotiate the salary. But basically, you want to set yourself up for success. You don't want to blindside your boss. You want it to be a collaborative thing. So that way they know it's coming. They don't think you're going to walk into your review without ever having talked to them and ask for a raise. And you're going to walk in there with research that shows them that you deserve it.
Yeah. Jessie, everything that you just shared, I 1000% agree with. I had to interrupt with snaps because I was so excited. My biggest pet peeve is people being like, well, when you're ready for a raise, wrong, too late, missed the boat. You need to start ahead of time. So I love that you started there. I think there are also like two quick things I would add to that, which is one, if your company has published competencies, like published expectations at various levels, you should be using that in your presentation, in your discussions with your
Absolutely.
boss. Like, hey, the company's already defined what it looks like. Here's where I think I am. Where do you think I am? Any gaps I need to close in this time period?
Yeah.
Because I love the idea of asking for their feedback. What do they need to see? I offer the same advice to my clients. But if there's something in writing that says, hey, a manager level does this, you use that because your manager may have higher expectations for a manager than your company does. And you can use that to kind of level set a baseline.
I
And the
love
second,
that. Yes.
yeah. And the second thing is to your point about, title and promotions. They are not the same as a raise. And all the time, I have clients like, I really need to get promoted. And I'm like, great. What are you excited about? What's the scope of your new role? What would that be? And they're like, well, no, I just want more money. Like, no, then you want to raise.
Yeah, that's
You
different.
don't
Yeah.
you don't need a promotion. You don't need to be managing a team of 12 people if you don't want to manage people. You can
Right.
advocate for a raise or a title change in your current role. It doesn't always have to be a promotion. And so I think, one of the common misconceptions of corporate is we think of those as the same thing. Like to make more
Mhm.
money, I must get promoted or I must manage people. But Lord knows I've worked for people who shouldn't have been managing people. So if you don't want to, don't do it
You
and
don't have
make
to.
those poor
Right.
people suffer.
You can still, yeah, you can still ask for a raise. And the
Mhm.
thing too is like make sure you're having conversations with your coworkers as well, because the most well-intentioned companies, nobody sets out to say, I'm going to pay people differently based on gender identity and racial group. No company sets out to do that. So it's something that happens accidentally because there isn't pay transparency, or there's not a formula for these things. So you want to make sure you have conversations with your coworkers as well, because I have heard so many people saying, well, this person got hired after me and they're making $10,000 more than I do. Okay, yeah, that's great information that you should put in that presentation, that your salary is lower than these other jobs, these other people. That's information to use. And if your coworkers feel uncomfortable talking about it, the over under game is the best thing you can do. Okay, you don't have to tell me what you make, but do you make over or under $70,000? And if they're like, oh, over that, okay, over under 80, over under 90, until you get to the point where they're like under that. Okay, so they're going to be between this amount and this amount, which tells you essentially what they're making and how that compares to you. And anytime you have these conversations with your boss, those check-ins, the 3 month, the 1 month, send that summary email. Reply to the original email so it's all in one thread. So you can say, thanks for meeting with me today. We talked about my progress toward these things. We said I need to improve on this stuff. Summarize it. Just want to make sure we're on the same page, because you want to make sure that you are doing the hard work. Expecting your boss to go do the things like find the standards that you need to be doing as a manager or whatever your role is, or expecting them to figure out if your coworkers are making more than you, you're asking another busy person who it's not their life. They're not getting paid it. They're not getting paid that money. So there's not that same urgency for them. Make it really easy for them. Don't be salty about it. This is you going to bat for yourself. So make it as easy as possible for them to say yes.
Yes.
Or
I
as hard as possible for them to say no.
Yes. And I 1,000% agree with that. The biggest misconception people will bring me is like, well, I've been doing good work. My boss knows about it. No, they don't. They are so busy doing their own work, they are not paying attention. Nor, honestly, is it their top priority to make sure that you are getting what you need. Now, every once in a while, you get a great boss who really cares. They ask, they want to be involved. You have clear career development plans. But more often than not, especially the more senior you get, that is not what your boss is focused on. Your boss is trying to survive to live another day. They're trying to get their own stuff done, right? So I love that concept of making it as easy as possible for them to do what you want them to do, and
Yes,
then let them do it. Then you're in a much better
yes,
position, much higher probability of success. So I feel like we've covered so many great topics. All of this has been so great, Jessie, and so tactical, which I love. It's ways that listeners can go tomorrow and start putting some of these things in place. But I always like to end the episode and ask, if you could tell listeners one thing, right? One piece of tangible tactical advice that they should go start doing immediately in their careers or in their wealth, as that's another area of your specialty, what would that be?
I would actually say that they need to do mindset work, because you can ask for a raise. You can have all the evidence in front of you showing that you deserve to make X amount of money, or that you qualify to make way more than what you do. But if you don't believe on a subconscious level, I'm not saying consciously where you're like, I know I should. We're talking like deep down, which deep down, sometimes we're not always aware. And the only thing that shows us that there's an issue with our level of belief are our circumstances. Maybe it's that it seems like you can't get above a certain salary cap, or you're always getting new jobs and they always turn toxic, right? Like, look at what your circumstances are revealing to you. And I'm not saying blame yourself, I'm saying be curious and ask yourself, what if some part of me feels like I don't deserve it? And what could be the explanation behind that? Because it could be something like that maybe your parents come from a blue collar background and now you're in the white collar world, and some part of you feels like you're betraying your roots because you're asking for more money than your parents ever could have made. So there can always be resistance. And the funny thing is that when you make it up, when you just pull reasons out of your butt, a lot of times it's a lot closer to the truth than you realize, because your brain's imagination is only going to pull from lived experience and from what it already knows, which means that it's going to pull from theories or stories or memories that already exist. So it's fine to just make it up and assume that that could be something that's affecting you. And you really have to get to a place where you feel worthy and deserving of not just asking for that money, but receiving it. And part of that is also the fear that comes with actually succeeding. So, a lot of times, our brain, you want to think about it almost like an air conditioning unit, and it's very comfortable at like a nice, balmy 74 degrees. And if you start to fail and your brain perceives that things are changing for the negative, it's going to kick on the heater and make you work harder to get you back to 74. But if you overshoot 74 and now it's 80 degrees in the house, it's going to start cooling it down to bring you back to that level of comfort. And that's because the way our brains are wired, it's the same hardware that we've had for 200,000 years. And so any kind of change, even positive change, is going to register as a threat to your brain. Because your brain's like, well, I don't like working in a toxic work environment and making shitty money, but at least I know how to handle this. I don't know what it's like to work in a supportive environment where I love the work that I'm doing and I love everybody around me. And if anything, the fear that normally comes from that is, what if I get used to it and it gets taken away? That's usually the most common fear that's there. So you want to make sure that there's no resistance to the life that you actually want. Because if you're afraid of failure, it's the other side of the coin. The fear of success is there as well. You're always going to be afraid of those two things at the same time. So you want to confront those fears head on. What are you afraid of if your life becomes exactly what you want it to be? And how can you react to that, right? Like maybe it's that, oh, none of my friends make more than a certain amount of money. And if I make more than them, it's not going to feel equal anymore. Like maybe your closest relationships are all based on the fact that you all bitch about your jobs. And then if you have a good job, now you have nothing to bitch about. So am I still going to have those relationships? There are so many reasons, but that's why I wrote that book, is because there are so many different ways to address that. But mindset is the foundation to all of that tactical advice. You could have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't believe it's going to work, chances are it won't.
Yeah. That's such a great takeaway, I think, for listeners. And it ties so closely. I have so many people ask about imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is a mindset thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a, hey, I don't deserve to be here. Hey, I don't know how to do this. It is an inability to trust yourself in these new situations. And I think it's so critical to spend some time being introspective and get yourself in a good mentality that's ready for what's to come. Because to your point, you'll always be facing new things. You'll always be facing either success or failure. And so, how do you make sure that mentally and emotionally you're prepared for that? And so, I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners. And Jessie, it's been so great having you on the show. We've covered so many great topics, so many great takeaways. We will definitely have to have you back in the future, but appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.